Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Man Talk. Glad to have you with you. My name is Vince Miller, founder of Resolute. We're excited to be in our new series still. It's called 30 Virtues That Build a Man. Got the book right here, hot off the press. Hope you'll pick up a copy of it and follow along. Today, I'm joined by Keith TerHaar. Thanks for being with us, man.
Good to be here again.
Yeah, so Keith TerHaar, you founded an organization called Intended for Health, right? Working with men on physical and spiritual health pieces of life. I know we've had conversations before, but I'm super excited about talking with you about this because I think it's an area of our life that we often ignore spiritually, but is incredibly important to vitality, right? Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so today we're looking at the topic from our book of obedience. And of course, I want to relate this a little bit to obedience, but it's more than that. So give us a little bit of an understanding of kind of what you do with guys through this organization that you founded, Intended for Health.
Right. Well, a lot of what I do is health coaching and integrated health coaching, which is about looking at the whole person holistically. And so you're looking at spiritual health, but physical health, emotional health, mental health, relational health, all those things that really fit together as a whole person. Yeah. Ultimately, I love helping men identify where they're just not living up to what God has intended them for, addressing those, and making some really meaningful changes that help them live out their purpose more fully and help them live the kind of meaningful lives that we all want to live.
Yeah. Now, what I love about Keith's perspective on things is the fact that Keith came from a counseling profession, right? Originally, and you got a lot of expertise there. You were involved with Resolute for a number of years. We did a bunch of spiritual coaching with men, and now you've moved on to health coaching. Very holistic, I understand that. But I think this is a much needed topic that is sorely addressed in Christendom, right? I mean, we don't often talk about our health from the platform, and I'm kind of wondering why. You have any thoughts on that?
It's a great question. Because
I hope I haven't stumped you.
Well, we're not talking about it. Sometimes maybe as Christians we haven't been as holistic, or we haven't integrated faith into every area of our lives. You know, we think, well, if we're doing the spiritual disciplines, isn't that enough? I grew up in a tradition that emphasized the way that God cared about everything, and we looked at the scriptures that talk about, you know, taking care of our bodies as a temple, and we look at the way those things really matter to God as well. But I think what I become passionate about is, even as we look at, you know, the purpose of a man and being a great father and husband and serving the kingdom, I think how can you do that very well if you're letting your body, your physical health go? You're getting sick, you're becoming more sedentary, you're losing energy. And so to me, physical health becomes that means to really living out that purpose more fully.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about leveraging the tool of our body for the kingdom by caring for the temple.
Right.
Now, I know that part of this is born out of the passion that you've seen poor examples of that in your own life. You've watched people's lives kind of waste away from poor choices with caring for their body, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, but I'll begin right here, looking in the mirror and saying, when I turned 40, which I think is a lot of guys.
Which was last year.
Well,
right?
hang on, little older than that. But when I turned 40, almost overnight, I found I was starting to gain some weight. I was losing energy. I was becoming more lethargic. I was battling some injuries and different things going on. So I felt like I didn't like the trajectory I was on. So personally, I needed to make some changes to be able to live up to what I felt like I was called to do. But certainly you see more extreme examples around, you know, a lot of people becoming very sick and developing diseases that are very preventable. You know, diabetes and heart disease are things that don't need to happen. In most cases, they can be prevented.
Yeah, so you're actually coaching people that are dealing with some of those issues today. Is that right?
Right.
Like one-on-one coaching, group coaching, stuff like that, right?
Love to do the one-on-one. I do some men's retreats too to try to help guys come together with a group of men and get things turned around. But We're all looking for a way to kind of pull the trigger on that, and it's hard to change behavior.
Okay, but let's just talk about this honestly, because I think I'm just thinking about the average guy and kind of some of the work you do. I'd probably be somewhat okay with sitting down with you one-on-one. I'd probably be a little nervous about meeting with you in a group, probably because of personal shame.
Okay.
Are you running into guys that are that find what you do intriguing, but are a little scared and hesitant to take that first step?
All the time.
Yeah. Why do you think they are?
Well, I think we know that change, any kind of behavior change, whether it's trying to improve your spiritual health, joining a men's group, getting involved in church, as well as the physical health elements, it's really hard to get started. And because of our pride, we don't often want to ask for help. We sometimes get stuck in ruts, and we tend to rationalize, right? Our nature is to justify and rationalize what we're doing, why we're doing it, all while things keep getting worse.
Yeah, all while they keep getting worse. And what's funny is today's lesson's about obedience, right? So I'm kind of thinking, okay, ultimately, I think you led us right here, but I keep wondering if this isn't an obedience problem, right? Are we lacking really being obedient to God, complying with God, submitting to God by not addressing some of these issues? And I guess I kind of want to pose that question to you. Is not addressing our emotional health, our physical health, our eating patterns, is it an obedience problem? Are we being disobedient by not addressing it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I like that you use the word submission. Don't we love that word?
Yeah,
we all want to submit, don't we?
Only if I'm wrestling with someone on the field of battle and they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Not if I'm doing it, right?
Right. Well, when we think about the very basics of our relationship with God, dating back to Old Testament, his early people, he gave the commandments, and one of the first one was, you got to keep me God and worship me and keep me first. And I think historically the history of mankind is that we don't really want to do that. So we find other things that become first. And let's say, sometimes those are the very things that are a barrier to good health. I think food, for example. And I'm the first one to say I love food. I love good food.
I think most people like food,
but,
right?
but it has become something that is so in our face. And it's a billion-dollar industry, and a lot of it very unhealthy. But most people, when it comes to it, they don't want to give up eating a lot of food or eating really unhealthy foods that they enjoy. So to some degree, I think that becomes a spiritual issue of are you willing to submit this area of your life to God or not? Because some people will say, well, I'll do this and this and this, but I don't want to touch that.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I think you're almost suggesting that by not making healthy choices, right, we're engaging in a subtle form of idolatry of self. Right. Is that true?
I think so.
Okay. And what are the consequences of it? I mean, you're probably this idolatry of self in this area of eating. So let's just stay with eating, because it's one area of health, right? Taking care of your health and exercise is another one. The types of food that you eat is another one, right? This is all idolatry of self, we could say. Right. Is that idolatry of self or disobedience? What are the ramifications of it? I mean, you're seeing people. I mean, you said some of them already, I think, but what are the ramifications of it?
I think the beautiful thing is that we get really good feedback.
Okay.
No pun intended, but you eat poorly and you get great feedback. Not only do you gain weight and some of those obvious things that sometimes happen, we get sick or we get disease, but I have clients who say, boy, when I start eating poorly, the next morning I wake up and I don't feel well. I have headaches. My energy is low. And I think that's where I like to go with people, because what we're often saying is that, my values, what's really important to me, require that I have good energy, that I feel good. I want to be a great father. Well, it's hard to be a great father if you don't feel like playing with your kids, right? It's hard to live with passion and energy if your body is just telling you, go sit down in a chair or take a nap. So I think you get feedback both as you look in the mirror on the scale, but you also get it in terms of just how you feel. And so I see that. I see men saying, I'm not living the way that I want to live. These are my values. This is where I want to go. But unless I change this, I'm not going to get there.
Okay, so let's dive into something that's a little bit more touchy. I would say is, I understand what you're talking about. When you turned 40, everything changed. I kind of felt that the same thing. I think you and I talked about that during those years, and kind of how our energy was waning. And man, when I was 15, I could metabolize anything, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, like I could eat an entire bag of chips and have a case of pop, and I was
pizza.
totally okay. Yeah, I felt great afterwards in all kinds of ways, and I can metabolize that, but definitely changes when I turned 40. But there are people out there that actually have chemical issues that deal with this, that keep their body from metabolizing things the right way.
Right.
I'm assuming that you wouldn't say exactly the same thing to them. We may be more of have taken the standard path of our biological and chemical health, right? And we need to just take in better food. But what about the guys out there that have struggled with weight their whole life, or struggle with depression their whole life? How would you speak about this holistic kind of piece of health and obedience to them?
Right. Well, it is holistic. So I think, without oversimplifying, God has given us a lot of examples and a lot of directives about how to manage and live more emotionally healthy as well as physically healthy. I love looking with guys at Philippians 4 and talking about not being anxious and things we can do to manage that. But I do believe that for many men who do struggle more with this, there are other ways that their health is going to come into play in the way that those things fit together. So for one, depression and anxiety are vastly improved through exercise, right? The way that changes brain chemistry, the way that gets our heart and lungs going. So
I know I feel better when I go work
Don't
out.
you?
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
seriously, there's something that happens after I'm done. Not only am I beat up, but I feel like, man, I accomplished something. I feel like I sweat some things through my body, right? I feel more energy even after I'm done, even though I'm exhausted.
real.
There are some things that happen.
It's
through
real. We know what happens to brain chemistry when we do that. We also know the way certain foods that we eat, and it can be an extreme thing for some people who have like gluten allergy and so forth. But
Right.
a lot of the foods that we have eaten, including processed foods, have such an inflammatory content to them.
Oh yeah, people
So-
are responding today all over the place regarding those things, aren't they?
They
Yeah.
are, and so sometimes it's a matter of recognizing, what, I respond to certain foods really poorly, and maybe I ought to look at that and eat a little bit differently. If I eat a ton of dairy, for example, some people find that they feel really sore, they feel beat up, their joints swell. All those kind of things can be changed by making some changes in what they eat.
Yeah, and this is what I love about what you do is you're kind of coaching people through this holistic process of kind of understanding things that they've maybe never understood before, right? Some of these guys are like shocked at, oh my goodness, these foods cause inflammatory issues in me, and I'm taking them in all the time, gradually over many years, or they have allergies to certain things and they take them away, and all of a sudden they feel better, or they start working out and they start feeling better, and their chemistry starts kind of changing and adapting regardless of their age, is what I hear you saying. And so you're having some really interesting, I would assume, conversations with guys who never thought about this stuff.
They're great conversations, and it's really rewarding work when you see guys, the lights go on, they figure some things out, and they come back saying, I feel so much better. And that's what we're going for.
Yeah. Our text today from 30 Virtues That Build a Man is actually from Matthew 7, and it's talking about food, believe it or not. It's talking about how a good tree bears good fruit, a bad tree bears bad fruit. Of course, Jesus is not just talking about produce here. He's talking about the outcomes of produce in our life, right? So he's using produce as an example of produce in our life. And you get certain inputs, you get certain outputs, right? And then he challenges us to this call of obedience. I mean, it's an amazing call of obedience. He invites us into it and calls us right into it. And he says that there's certain fruit that believers produce, and we can't say that we produce it and then not produce it. In fact, he says here in verse 22, he says, "On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I think that's a pretty frightening set of verses there, because it's saying you thought you were producing the right fruit, but you really weren't producing the right fruit. And the fruit that he's looking for is obedience. I would say full out, all out, radical obedience to God, not just lip service, right? And I think that's where this holistic piece is kind of coming in for you, is you're seeing this holistic piece of the gospel that says, care for the temple of the body, careful about what you put into it, not only the time, the energy, the things that you think about, the food, the exercise to get certain outputs, and you're kind of watching men transformed by this process, and they're becoming more obedient, you feel, to the call of Christ?
Well, yeah, it made me think about the way I try to start with every client by doing an assessment. And we assess 7 different areas of health. And some of them aren't things you necessarily think about as health, but they're like relationships, and including your spiritual health, right? And so I think it speaks to the need to stop and take a look at ourselves, which we are sometimes reluctant to do. We don't always like what we see when we look in the mirror. But doing this, so to speak, sometimes does help us identify the blind spots that go, this isn't an area where I've really seen and obeyed what God is asking me to do. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure you find that as you're working with the guys in a spiritual role, mentoring them. What do you see as the barriers, or what are the steps that you suggest for guys who are saying, hey, I want to work on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of the difficulty and the challenge with guys is like first assessing if they really do want to make a change, right? Like,
have to want it.
They have to want it. They have to decide they want it. I see guys repeat sin over and over and over again. You've seen this too. I'm sure you've seen this in counseling. Guys that come in, want to be counseled, but don't really want to change. Yeah. And I think it begins with first making a conscious decision that we want to change. It's like putting a stake in the ground and saying, drawing a line in the sand, really probably drawing a line in the concrete, saying, look, this is it. We're erecting a milestone right here, and we're going to move forward. We're going to make a commitment. I think after that, then it's taking a step of obedience by trusting something outside of ourselves. You talked about feedback, right? I think, you first got to get feedback and then figure out what is the right step of obedience. And sometimes we don't know, which is probably why you're talking to other guys. They don't know what to do. They know something in their life needs to change, and it's something regarding their health, but they don't know what it is. And I think that's the next step, is not only deciding, but it's getting feedback to then make the conscious decisions that they're going to make after that. And I think next after that, it's choosing to make advanced decisions, right? So that when we get into those moments again, we don't repeat the same things. I mean, you're probably telling guys that all the time. I mean, like, if I go to the store and I buy a bag of M&Ms that's the size of a grocery bag, right?
They make them.
They do. They do. And I go buy that bag of M&Ms and I bring it in my house. There's a high likelihood that I'm going to eat them. But if I make the conscious decision that I'm only going to buy good food and bring it into my home, then it's much easier. I was sitting at the table with a friend the other day, and we had 2 plates of food, and he had a hamburger and fries, and for some reason I had tacos and fries. I don't know why that went together, but we're at a popular restaurant. I had tacos and fries, and I ate my tacos and I didn't eat my fries. And I actually asked the woman to come over and take my plate, so I didn't eat the fries while he's eating his fries and he's feeling bad. And I actually said to her, can you take my fries away before I actually eat them, right? Because I know that if I remove them, I probably won't eat them. So it's a conscious, advanced decision. Those fries are bad for you, by the way. There's no fry in the world that you could ever eat that's good for you.
People hate to hear it, but it's probably the worst food out there.
It's absolutely the worst food you could ever eat. If you looked at how many calories are in 5 fries, it'll blow your mind. But anyway, as he's eating, he's going, yeah, I probably shouldn't put this next fry in my mouth. And I said, yeah, you probably shouldn't. And you can make a decision not to do that, right? We can make a decision not to do that. So I think that's kind of where some of this begins for me. It's just making conscious decision to draw a line in the earth permanently, then getting some feedback about what would be the best decisions to make outside of our own self, and then making some of those advanced decisions so that we don't keep repeating the same insanity over and over and over.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I think, and you speak to 2 things that I think are so important. One is making intentional, conscious choices versus being passive and just kind of letting life come and do whatever. But secondly, even with that other friend, you can lead in this area. by doing something different and having other guys, not to guilt them, but to have them see you're doing something different.
Yeah, just positive accountability, right? Well, you don't. I think sometimes we only see accountability in the negative sense, right? It's not always like shame on you, bad Keith.
Yeah, that's not good.
I mean,
that's not very helpful.
I mean, once in a while we need a good kick in the pants, or sometimes I need to kick you in the shin, and it's okay. But sometimes we just need to say, hey, how did it go last week? Did you eat a plate of fries? If you did eat a plate of fries and a bag of M&Ms, then let's talk about removing that this next week, and then try again, and try more positive. Like, how about I hold you accountable to eating a salad a few times this week, or something like that, or whatever it is. I mean, I'm just saying it's positive accountability. It's not just the negative shaming accountability. Yeah. So, anyway, Keith, thanks for being with us, guys. I hope you enjoyed our time together today. I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of 30 Virtues That Build a Man. Like I think every one of these conversations we're having here, you can have. We're just modeling it for you. And I'm hopeful that you'll do this, because this is exactly how we become better men. By the grace of God, two guys sharing stories, learning from one another. And Keith, thanks for the work that you do with Intended for Health. I'd love these guys to connect with you. You can connect with Keith straight on his website. It's intended4andhealth.org, right? .com.
Yeah, that just makes a little bit of difference.
Yeah, intended4health.com. Anyway, thanks, Keith, for being with us. We'll see you right back here next time on another edition of Man Talk.